Yep. So last session we learned about few modules in Node.js. Node.js modules, how to handle a file stream module. We discussed about another one, OS module, how they work. Now in the modules, we have another module is a path. Already I told you that some modules are inbuilt available. We can directly use them. Some modules are not available. We have to import and use. FS module is not by default available, so we have to import, install and use it. OS and path, these are the modules which are available, we can access directly. So what is path module? Simple. Actually, path module is used for accessing the current path. In which folder, in which file you are currently working, its location, all these details. It's just like location path. It's just like location path, you can access it. So that means how the location path works in the same way. So that means, so we can simply import where path is equal to require path, that is the module. And what we can do is console.log. Through path we can access so many details. Simple. Few important details like base name, directory name, extension, format of file, all such information you can access. So what is the purpose of path module? So the path module purpose is, it provides properties and methods to access and return to access the current path details. So current path details means which includes like file name, like directory name. So like file path, format, etc. That means which file you are accessing, which file you are using, all such information you can access by using these details. So path module is used for accessing and displaying the details of the file that you are currently using. This is important, especially when we are working with files. That means later we have to send files, we have to access files and use them. In that case, we have to know about the file before we send the file, we are access the file. So you can try this simply. So like base name, I'm just using base name. And let's run this in a separate location. Index, node index.js. It will get base name function. Okay. So this base name is going to get the details. So that means we have to write the path. Path is like d:/images. So /images/ some pic / some pic.jpg. Like this, if we use a path, the path related information it will get and display. Base name means the file name. It will get the file name. For example, if I want dir name, so that means it is going to access the directory name and display the directory name. You can see, I'll say node index.js. It will get the directory name, which directory we are having. That means whatever the path you send into it, the path related information it will gather and display. Because whenever we are accessing any file from any remote location. So we have to know its path, extension, and all details. Suppose if you want extension, that means path have an option. What is that extension name? Extension name will return what is the file extension, .jpg. What is advantage of this? We can verify whether the file is JPG or not. From where they will send this? They send this from the front end. You remembered we learned about input file. Input type is equal to file. There I told you that we can filter the files so that user can select only JPG file. So how to do that? How to display only JPG files? How you can design a file so that it can display only JPG files? Forget HTML. We use an attribute called accept. By using accept, we use .jpg. That means it will display only JPG files. There I told you that it is not restriction. It is just only filtering. User wants, he can select all files. Then again, all files will come. Then how to restrict? How to restrict? Restrict is nothing but after they uploaded, they send this to server side. They will send this file path to server side. Then what we have to do? We have to get the extension of that file. How do we get? If what is that? By using path dot extension, ext name is dot jpg. Extension name of which file? The path. That means file path. So that means the path coming from this location actually. So if the file path is equal to .jpg, then allow. Otherwise, don't allow. That means from client side, they will send a file name. We will verify that. Is it JPG or not server side? So that is the point. Now we have this kind of combination to work. So that means they sent a file. We have to know what type of file it is. Then we have to get the extension name. So we can access that and we can define. For example, this is just only one option I am configuring. Similarly, so path dot, so base name, that means it will get the file name. Path dot, so dir name, that means it will get the directory name. It will get the directory name. All that information it will display. So whatever files and folders you are dealing server side, you have to know the information about them, which is possible by using this path object. So that is the concept of path. So that is just only one example here. So these are not very complex things, very simple to handle and understand, right? Next, very important. So in the Node.js, we have to know about HTTP module. HTTP module. Another very important is HTTP module. What is the purpose of HTTP module and how this HTTP module works? Actually, HTTP module, it is used to configure and create server. It is used to configure and create server. HTTP module is used to configure and create server. So what server can do is server can handle request from client and send response and send response customized to client request. Server can handle request from client and send response customized to the client request. So to accept the request from the client, to process the request, and send a response, we need to do that by using this HTTP module. HTTP module is used to create server, configure the server, and define everything. Now let's see how it works, how it is going to manage. So first, HTTP module is not available by default. It is not available by default. So we have to install the module. So let's install npm install HTTP. Save. So we are downloading and installing HTTP module. Simple. So npm install HTTP. Save flag to save into package JSON. So that is the HTTP module, right? So it is configured. Now, how to create and configure the server? Let's see. We have to import it where HTTP is equal to require HTTP. After configuring this, now we need to create a server. Generally, where server is equal to HTTP dot create server. We have a method create server. This create server method, so you see it is asking some listener. So it is asking some listener. So that means it is using listener and server options it is asking. So create server actually configures the server options. Server options means here you have to define the options. Server options will be so many. So server options will be like what should be the host server name, that means protocol, port number, and method. So you have to define the method get or post. So many will be there. Generally, to know the server here, so to information about the server, let's go to definition. You see, this is server. Means I'm just exploring you all the details. That means if any method, any class you are trying to use in your projects, and generally in classes for every concept, what is required that we will teach you. But sometimes in companies, so you have to rarely work with some more additional things of the same class. From the same class, some more additional things you have to work. Then you must able to explore by yourself. You must able to know about them by yourself. That means people who already learned JavaScript from us, or UI technologies, JavaScript, Angular, React from us, they joined some companies, they are working in companies. After 2-3 years also, some people today also they send a mail saying that, sir, currently I am working in this project and I am having this requirement in JavaScript, how to do. But 3 years he was working on JavaScript, but that concept he doesn't need. But suddenly now he is working on another project where he need that particular option, and he never used it. He never learned it because that is not required in general, but some rare projects may need it. then you cannot depend on your faculty. So you can ask, but you can explore by yourself. You don't need to ask. You can explore by yourself. You can know about it and you can learn what it is and you can start using it. Still, if you are facing difficulty, then you can contact. So how it is unable to, I am unable to implement. I saw it, but I am unable to implement. Then you can get help. Even seniors also, because sometimes, because already I showed you na, in HTML, JavaScript, we learned few methods and properties, but for every concept, lot of methods will be there. Suppose we learned location object. For location object, what properties we learned? Location href, location URL, location host, location port, location protocol, but location have so many. How to know about all of them? I told you na, we can write small logic. You can write an iterator. Through iterator, you can read all the properties and print them. Right here, especially in this type of environment, you can try like this. Right click on this method and select go to definition. When you select go to definition, it will take to the class from where it is derived. Then you can see this is the definition. And see in that, so the function create server is having options. Options are what type? Options are server option types. So okay, that means it is going to take these server options and request listener. So and see, if I want to know what are these options, right click on this and go to definition. Then it will take to the server options. See, server options have a lot of details. So incoming message, server response, you see so many options are there. That means incoming message, server response, all these details are defined. Usually we don't need all these options to use all these. See, hundreds will be there. We cannot use all these options. Then what to use? We have to use only what is required for that particular situation, right? Generally what we do is, when we work with create server, you see two here. One more point, when I move the mouse onto it, you see HTTP server 1 plus overload is there. What does that means? 1 plus overload means it is having two types of functionality. That means this method is having two types of functionality. In one situation, it can use one functionality. In another situation, it can use another functionality. So currently, you see, it is having those options. Technically now, see, I will remove this here. I will remove. When I write this, you see, it is showing, so request listener. And so that contains one more overloaded version is there. One more overloaded option is there. Actually, we don't need to use those all options as of now. Just if you need, you can use them. Otherwise, just configure the server. Okay, this is server configured. We created a server. After that, you see server have so many options. Server object contains lot of details. Usually server uses an option called listen. Listen means server starts. On which port number? Port number, I will just give some port number. By default, you saw your port number was 5500, na? Right? When you are using Visual Studio Code and when you designed a project, on which location server was working? On port number 5500. That we can change. We can put any port number, right? Suppose I given the port number 3030. It's your wish. You can configure. After that, console.log. Console.log. We will put a message saying that server listening. Server listening at port number. So what is it? HTTP : Your server name will be same. It will not change. What is your server name? 127.0.0.1 colon. Port number will be 3030. This is your port number. That means by using create server, you created a new server and you started the server. Now this server can handle the request from the client and it can send response to client. For that, we need to write request and response headers. How we will see that? Initially, so if I configure this and I run this, you see server listening. Server listening on this particular port number. Okay, let's try that. Open http://127.0.0.1 colon. What is it? 3030. That is the server IP address and port number. Enter. Now you can see that server is listening, but what to respond? Server started, then what to respond? It has to manage the request and response. That means you need to design a server. That server currently not responding. You see, server is not responding. It is still working. Na? It is still working. Server is not responding. Result not came, right? Result not there. That means you designed server is listening. That's okay, good. Then what is the responsibility of server? Server responsibility is to get the request from you, process the request and send a response. Whenever user request what to send as response, you have to tell. That means how to manage the request and how to manage the response. You have to configure that. So that we will see now. So first point, after configuring, first point here. So the first question is, what is the role? What is the role of HTTP module, the HTTP server? What is the role of HTTP server? The role of HTTP server. The role of HTTP server, the answer is, it is responsible. It is responsible for handling the request from client. It uses a HTTP handler. It uses a HTTP handler. It uses a HTTP handler. It will process the request in HTTP processing pipeline. It comprises of application pool. These all words are important. I will show you a sample diagram actually, how it actually works. Roughly, you can have a note of the diagram actually, how the HTTP processing pipeline works and what is the request. Generally, when a client makes a request, this is the client. So this is the client or user. Okay. When client makes a request, this request will come to the HTTP server. This is the HTTP server, or we often call this as web server. HTTP server, or we often call as web server. This HTTP server or the web server contains it contains HTTP processing. It comprises of HTTP processing pipeline. We call HTTP processing pipeline. HTTP processing pipeline. Inside this server, you will have application pools actually. Application pool, app pool. That is application pool. Application pool means this is the location where all your applications are present. This is the location all the applications will be there. That means all your applications are present. Apps here. Your all applications are configured here. Application pool. In this, you will have a HTTP handler. It will have a HTTP handler. That means inside this HTTP server, you will have a HTTP handler. You will have a HTTP handler. What this HTTP handler will do is actually all the application resources are kept here. That means this is your resources. Resources means your files. That means .html, .css, .js. All your resources will be here. Means they are all maintained in a location. These all resources are maintained in a location. Now what happens is when client request comes, this is the request. So when the client request comes, this request will be processed in the processing pipeline. By whom it will be processed? By using a handler. Handler is responsible for processing the request. And remember here various types of files will be there. JSON, XML, HTML. This handler, according to the request, it will communicate with the resources. Get the resources, and it can send that as a response to the client. That means that resource can be sent as a response to the client. It can be sent as a response to client. So when client makes a request, the request will be processed and it will go to the handler. Handler is going to identify the request. Based on that, it will respond. Response can be in which form? That means when client makes a request, response can be in which form? It can be HTML response, it can be file response, or it can be JSON response, it can be XML response. Response can be in several formats. That means the response from the server can be HTML response, can be a file response, can be a JSON response. So what it should respond with? What is the response type? Generally here, what are the request types? What are the request types? What are the request types? Request types already we learned so many times. Now what you are thinking? Get, post, put, all these comes under what? Request types. What are the response types? What are the response types? Response type can be HTML response, it can be file response, it can be JSON. That means based on the request, the response will be there. Based on the request, the response will be there. This is a simple sample option to understand. So what is request? So here we will define here. HTTP server configures the requests which can be get, this is for fetch, post, this is to submit, So put this is to modify, or you say update, or you say update. And patch, this is to partial update. Delete, so to delete. All these interactions are defined. Right. Now HTTP server configures the response, which can be file, JSON, HTML. Response can be file, JSON. So one example we will see. We haven't configured these details. That means one more point is response details. Response details are defined by using server response object. Response details are defined by using server response object, like status code, like set header. Set header uses an content type. And here we have to type of content. And right. So we have status code, set header, and all these options are configured there. Now let's see how to handle them. So we were configuring here. Previously, our server is not responding. We will stop that. I already stopped it. Server stopped. You see, cannot reach the page because you created server which is not responding anything. So we will go into the file. Now we will create a server. This server uses a callback function actually. It uses a callback function. This callback function is going to handle two things. One is request, another response. You can use your lambda style because these days people write lambda expressions. By using lambda style, they define. Now, what are the options? Currently, we are sent when server requested and we want to send some response, then we have to define response. And see, response contains lot of properties. So usually in this response properties, important I given you like status code. Status code, if request is successful, then we put the status code 200. If what they requested is not available, we will say 404. That means for every purpose, for every request, we have a status code. These are different status codes actually. I hope on one occasion I showed you. These are all status codes. These are all different status codes for different reason. On a specific occasion, we learned that these status codes are there. Actually, a web developer have to know these status codes because when clients makes a request on that, what problem occurred, we have to identify and report that problem. On that request, what problem occurred, we have to identify that and report it. Generally, for that, we have to know the request. 200 means okay. That means it indicates that if request is okay, there is no problem, then we can respond. Response, we can define so many response details. For example, if I want to send some response, like, so the response is set header. Set header indicates what type of content we have to send as response. That means we have to define set header. In this, we need to specify the content type. That means what is the content type? Content type, what type of content you are sending. So suppose text slash HTML. If it is CSS, text slash CSS. This is MIME type. Already we know the MIME types. So I told you what is difference between MIME type and extension. What is difference between MIME type and extension? What is difference between MIME type and extension? We already learned MIME type, na? Content type means MIME type. Suppose MIME type is image slash JPG, JPEG. What extensions it can have? .jpg, .jpeg, .jif, if. That means JPG have several extensions. What is point is, under every MIME type, there will be so many extensions. A developer can refer to all extensions by using one MIME type. So instead of mentioning the extensions, developer have to mention the MIME type. Under one MIME type, several extensions will be there. MIME type defines what type of file. Under that type, there can be so many extensions. This all comes under the category of one MIME type, that is JPEG. JPEG. So MIME type contains collection of multiple extensions. So here you have to define, because if I say this is HTML, it can be .htm or .html. Two extensions will be there. Because HTML files, already I told you that HTML means it can have extension .htm or .htm. That is the reason we don't know which extension, then both should work. Then we have to define the MIME type. And we have to send the response.end. Response.end, what you want to send as response? Because the type is HTML, we have to send HTML as response. Suppose welcome to Node.js. This is the response we are sending through that. That means server is currently we are not using any request object. Request object we will see in the next point. Currently we are using which object? Response. That means if user requests this should respond. Server should respond with this. Earlier server was not responding, we just created. Now we created server to respond with this. That means now start the server and see. So server listening. Server listening, let's open and refresh this now. It will respond. This time we are creating a server which is responding with what we are expecting. It can respond with HTML, it can respond with JSON, it can respond with any file. File means you can send index HTML file, you can send login HTML file, you can set a PDF document, you can send. This is, we created a server and we are managing the request from the server. If server stopped, that means you press Control C now. That means server stopped. Server stopped. It's not listening anymore. Then once you refresh, then it will not respond. Then it will says that I cannot reach because server is not responding. It's turned off, shut down. Now once server is on again, we have to run this. Server is listening again. Then it can start responding. That means it's important that we need to configure the servers and define the server, right? This is generally how you manage the request and response. But actually our concept is we need to design server in such a way it should connect with API, get the data from API and return. That means not API, database. It should connect with MongoDB, get the data from MongoDB and return it. We will see how it can manage that. But first we need to learn how to configure the server. So let's see the basic syntax here, how to configure it. Syntactically, how to define. First, we have to import require HTTP. After importing, we have to create. Actually, we use the word majority const. Why? Because const indicates that initialization is mandatory, because server initialization is important, right? Server is equal to HTTP dot create server, and it will use a callback function with the request and response. With request and response. And the response can be response dot status code, some 200. Then we have response set header. So here content type, we have to define what type of content, text / HTML. Comma, you have to give. Another response dot end. We have to send some HTML. Welcome to Node.js. That's how we send the response. And server dot listen, and on port number. Console.log and server listening. That's how we need to configure server listening on that particular port number. Now, we need to know about another important point is how server can communicate with backend databases, get that and interact with it. So you learned about server, keep it aside now. So that means now we have to learn how to communicate with the database. Then the database communication we will write with server. That means how to design server to send response ready. Now we need to learn how to write the communication with the database, which can get the data and return to server. So now we will see how Node.js connecting with MongoDB. How Node.js connects with MongoDB. So this is the point we will see. Now, if you can see this, now you can use server with MongoDB combinations. So for that, first what you have to do is you have to install MongoDB driver for Node.js. You have to just use npm install MongoDB. Save. How you configure the options. Right. So let's install MongoDB now. npm install MongoDB. Save. So MongoDB okay, installed successfully, done. Now here we will write the logic. First we have to create a Mongo client, because MongoDB contains two libraries, server library, client library. To connect with MongoDB server, we need a client library. So we have to require MongoDB. In that Mongo client class, we have to import this one. That means this is a reference for the client class. Okay. So this is a reference for the client class, Mongo client. Okay. Now this Mongo client have to connect with MongoDB server. What is the server address connection string? So you need a connection string to connect with MongoDB. What is MongoDB connection string? Remembered, na? It is MongoDB : /127.0.0.1:27017. I hope you remembered. I told you that any technology have to connect with the database. For that, they need connection strings. For every database, connection string will be different. For every database, connection string will be changing. For MongoDB, the connection string is this URL. That is the connection string. Okay. Now, next step, what we have to do is open Mongo client. We have an option connect method. Connect method is used to connect with the server. With which connection string we have to define the connection string. After that, it will use a callback function. This callback function will return error if there is problem. It will return a client object. If it is successful. That means if there is a problem in connection, if there is a problem in the connection, if there is a problem in the connection, server is not responding or some problem, then error will catch it. If it is successful, then client object will allow you to communicate with the database. So we need two objects. So here we will write an option. If no error, if there is no problem, then console.log, I will temporarily print a message connected successfully. Connected successfully. This message should come. Otherwise, else it should display console.log, the error, whatever error came, it should display. Error, actually, we can display message, or if I say error, it will show complete details. If you want complete details, you can display complete details, otherwise only message. Okay, now let's run this and see. This is Node.js communicating with database, verifying whether connection working or not successfully. Let's check this. So you observe here now, we need to run that node index.js. But before running this, I will do one thing. I will go to services, and in services, let's go to MongoDB services. So we have MongoDB service. We will right click on the service and say stop. That means I am stopping MongoDB server. So MongoDB server is not working. Then Node.js is trying to communicate with it. And now see, it should catch the error. So the error object should catch the error and it should display if any problem occurred in the connection. It will take a while because it should connect with server and verify that. And if it is not responding, it will get that and display. See, connection refused. That means it is unable to connect. It got the error message and displayed. Actually, lot of details will be there. Only error code, the error message, everything. You can put your own message. It's not mandatory that you have to use error messages only. So it is showing the error message because we stopped it. Let's start the database server. So, okay, database server started running. Now run the same program again and it should say connected successfully. So previously having a problem, it identifies that problem. If there is no problem, then it can communicate with it. Okay. But our concept is, this is first example. This is an example. I will just give you this example. This is an example for connecting with server. So MongoDB server, connecting with MongoDB server. This is the program for connecting with. After connection successful, we need to communicate with a database in that table and we need to access and display. Now, which database we created? Remember, what is the MongoDB database we created? iShop DB, Smart Shop DB. We created one database according to our project. According to our project, which database we created? The database we created is Smart Shop DB. we created Smart Shop DB. So which contains, yeah, shopping DB. Yeah. Okay, I asked you to try na. I asked you to design entire database na according to the project. I given a document, right? This is according to the project. All documents are there. Means entire database is there. So the database is what? The database here I am using is Smart Shop DB. In Shopping DB, we created only two, and I asked you to design entire database according to project. In my computer, I already designed that in a Smart Shop DB. In that, see what are the collections I am having. TBL categories, TBL customers, TBL products, everything will be there. Suppose I want to access all the categories and display. From categories table, we need to access all categories and display. So see how to write the logic now. So here connection successful. Okay. If connection successful, if there is no error, then what should happen? We have to create an object, database object. This database object should communicate with a database in our server. Then you see, if connection is successful, client object can give access to database in that server. That means what we have to do, through client object DB method, you can access the database. Database is what? Smart Shop DB. You can access it. Now this database is loaded, because you know that in MongoDB to access any database, you have to use the method DB database, and which you can access with the reference of DBO. That means now Smart Shop DB can be accessed by using DBO. Database object, in that we have to access a collection. That means dot collection. Collection, which collection? Collection name. Collection name is TBL categories. That is the collection name. To read all the records in that collection, we have to use which function? Find. We have to use the find method. Find method will return all the records. So, but very important, whatever records this Node.js is reading, it will read. So in a plain string format, we have to convert that into array. Then what you have to do, we have to use toArray. By using toArray, we can convert the data coming into array. Okay, it uses a callback function. This callback function will have error and will have documents. That means if there is problem in reading documents, it will return error. If there is no problem in reading documents, it will read every document and store in documents. That means finally result is present in documents. So we will write a condition. If no error, that means there is no problem in reading, then console.log, currently we are printing those documents. That's it. Else, if there is problem, then console.log display that error. That error message must be displayed. So what is the logic here? So if connection is successful, then through client object DB method, we are accessing a database in the MongoDB. And in that database, we are accessing a collection called TBL categories. In that we are finding, you can write queries. ID is one, right? You know how to write queries. Na? You can write the queries. If I don't write the query, by default, it is all. It is going to read all. So I will remove this. Just this is enough. Find. And it will return the documents. Let's run this and see now. It should able to return the documents and display. In that I have only one category. So that is the reason it is returning only that category. You observe here in this MongoDB is that in this MongoDB, You can see TBL categories. Categories is having only one document. Suppose I will add one more document here. I am inserting another document here. So another document, not file, add another document in that. So what are the details? So here I am adding the details. An object in that category ID. Category ID is footwear and category name. Category name. Category name. Category ID is 2. Number it is, and its name is footwear. So this we have defined. Now click insert. So that is inserted successfully. So the footwear, fashion, everything fine. What errors it is having? Category ID. Here problem is there. Okay. So this is footwear. Okay. Now I will click on insert. It is inserted successfully. Once it is inserted successfully, now what we have to do is we have to go to the program and compile this one more time. I will compile one more time. These two records are there. We can update the records, modify the records. The category ID should be 2. Then I will go here and I will make the changes here. So it is 2 and update. It is modified. And I am running here one more time. So every time after modification, and it will display the modified. That means we are connecting with the database. We are accessing the data from the database and we are returning. But actually not here. We have to send to client. Client means in the browser, he must see it. If that is what API is doing now, when you are using fake store API, it is showing in the browser. That means now we have to create a communication between database, Node.js with the server client, right? That is the complete communication now. As of now, it is just only reading. That means insert, update, delete, everything work in the same way, right? For example, see, I will give this example. This is reading documents from database collection. Reading documents from database collection. This is the logic actually, how we have done. So one more time I will show, observe, because first time it is little confusion to understand. First point, we have to import Mongo client, where Mongo client is equal to require MongoDB. In MongoDB, we need Mongo client. Now we need a connection string, where connection string. So connection string is MongoDB : /127.0.0.1 : 27017. That is the standard connection string for MongoDB. Now we have to access Mongo client.connect method. Connect method will connect with connection string and uses a callback function. This callback function will have an error and will have a client object. So if there is no error, so if there is error, then console.log display that error. If there is no error, we have to create a database object, DBO, database object. So it should access client object DB. By using that, we will access smart shop DB. We access the database, and through the database object, we can access the collection. What is that? TBL some products dot find. I don't want all. Then I can put filter here. I can put filter here. What is it? Category. Category should match with what? Suppose electronics like this, or it should match with jewelry. Jewelry. Then what we have to do? To array. Use as a callback function. In this callback function, we will have error when there is problem, and we will have documents if it is successful. If there is no error, then it should send console.log. We have to use documents. Otherwise, if there is a problem, then console.log, we have to send error. That's how we need to display. Now this time we are using a filter for finding the records, and you can see, so we are accessing it. It should display empty. Why? Category jewelry not there. We will see how many products are there in our database. Our database should have all of them, na? So we have TBL products, 0 documents. Currently documents not there inside it. We will do one thing. We will import data from JSON file we created, na? So products.json file. Yeah, from this file we will import all the data and put it. Done. Now let's run this and see. We have some data. Now let's run this and see. It should get all the jewelry products and display. This is the list of all jewelry category related products. It is all jewelry category products. It is filtering and displaying the details. That means how to communicate with the database, get the data from the database and return it. Now, very important is, this is only reading. You can apply all your filters. That means whatever the filters you have learned, you can apply all of them. Here, inserting, updating, deleting also important. Now we will see how we can manage the update, insert and delete operation. Same concept is same. For example, in categories table, how many categories are there? 2 categories are there. I want to add one more category. From Node.js, how you can insert? See, just you need to make changes in this query. Let's go here. We will make some change. Okay, what is it? So up to that, everything same, right? So here we want to insert some data into a table. Then what data you want to insert? First, prepare the data. Data is an object which contains, so one is property. What is it? Category ID, I will give as 3. Another one is category name, I will give it as fashion. Okay. Now this must be inserted into table. How? DBO dot collection. What is the collection name? TBL categories. TBL categories. How to insert? We have insert 1. We learned, na? Insert 1. What we have to insert? Data. And it uses a callback function. This callback function will have error if there is problem in inserting, and it will show result if it is successful. That means what we will do? Simply we will put a message here. So if no error, if there is no error, just I will put a message console.log record inserted. This message I will give. Record inserted. We have to use the MongoDB commands. Now let's run this and see. Actually, in categories table, I will go to the categories table. I'll show you the categories table. Okay. You see, in the categories table, only 2 documents are present. Okay. Let's run the program again. Index.js. It says record inserted. Once record is inserted, Once refresh this and see one more record added. That means now the third record is added into the database. So, but actually we don't insert directly from Node.js. What we do, we design a form in our jQuery. From that form, we submit to Node.js. Node.js will collect the data and insert into MongoDB. That is the process. Currently, you just hard-coded this data here, but actually this data comes from your forms. That means from the form, we submit the data, it will collect it and it will insert into the database. That we are going to achieve now. We are going to integrate this now, right? But for that, first you need to understand how to write the queries in the backend. Example, this is inserting documents. Inserting documents, so this is the process. Similarly, you can try update and delete. Just you need to put rough values there temporarily. But very important, the main concept is how to send these results to client. How do we access from the client? That means now what should I achieve is, in the URL, he will request like this, same like fake store API / products. Then it should get those products data and display. That means whatever the data is present in that API, it should display. The same approach we need to design. So some problem, yeah. This is fake store official there. Similarly, our data should work. That means what should we able to design? http://127.0.0.1/ so some port number 3030 / if I request categories, then it should return all the categories. Categories from which location? From the MongoDB database it should get. That means now we have to create server and we have to communicate with MongoDB. Server have to communicate with MongoDB. Then it can return. For this, we have to design APIs. We have to create APIs. And to create APIs, we need a middleware called Express. By using Express, if we can create the middlewares configure, then we can design the complete API. Now you need to know what is an API, how API is used to communicate with the database and client. Now what is the communication should work? Currently what you have designed up to now, 2 points. That means we have database. So from Node.js, Node.js, you are communicating with the database. And one more you saw, from Node.js, you are communicating with the client. You have seen this also. That means we have seen these 2 parts separately. How to create a server, this part we have seen, and how to interact with the database, this part we've seen separately, right? Now, in the first example, we have seen this area. Am I right? In the first example, we have seen this part, right? In the second example, we have seen this part. Now, in the third example, we have to combine all. That means from client side, make a request, it will communicate with the database, get the data, and not return data here. Not return data in command line. It should return data in browser in a JSON form. Then if it returns data in JSON form, here we will use JavaScript jQuery to consume and present the data. For that, we have to create a API. For that, we need a new option. That is what? Express. That we'll see next session. Right? Tomorrow we will do that. Right? Because these all you need to practice first. First you practice these examples what I given today. Means creating server, communicating with database, interacting with the data. Then tomorrow we will see how the complete end-to-end process works from client side to server side, how it is going to work. Tomorrow we will see. Yeah?